Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hounds podcast. Back together with Leaf and Chris. And another episode, and this one we're talking about the cutting edge. I imagine you could guess what that's about. And I have it on good authority, Chris, that if you sharpen your axe, you ruin the temper, so why bother?
Yeah, you're not supposed to sharpen.
That's what I've read, and I'm not sure we should even bother doing this podcast. I also heard on good authority via the internet that you shouldn't even sharpen your axe beyond a blunt tip.
Yeah, this is also.
That's what I've read. I mean, somebody thumbed up his comment. So, no, but seriously, folks, Chris is going to lead off on this one. And I'm gonna, because I think he's got a little bit more sharpening experience than I do when it comes to axes. I think, and between the both of us, I'm quite certain that we've done every method you can do.
Yeah.
Between filing, Chris has got more filing experience than I do. But between the both of us, I mean, I think we've done everything. Belt sanders in several different sizes. I've tried the oscillating sander method, which I found is actually pretty nice. Works like a automatic puck, I guess is the best way to put it. Whip wheels, I've tried that. And of course, we both do stones. And between the two of us, I'm pretty sure there isn't an axe we can't sharpen.
Yeah.
So
like you're saying, there's many tools and methods of getting a sharp edge. And there's some things that I would avoid, me personally, because I think they're just too harsh. One would be a bench grinder. I think it's too harsh, it's too coarse, and it really does heat the edge up too quick. But everything else is fairly safe with a little bit of skill. You gotta know your limitations. I traditionally sharpen most of my axes by hand. I enjoy the process. So I guess we'll talk about tools needed. That's kind of a little bit of power versus hand. Leaf has more experience with the power tools than I do. Like I said, I enjoy the traditional process. A file and a puck. That's my go-to. Even if I'm gonna use. Sometimes I'll use my 2x72 to put a mirror polish on an axe. I still set the bevels with a file. I'm just more comfortable with it. But I know like you're very comfortable with using a 2x72 for the whole process. And there's nothing wrong with that.
and it's not needed at all.
No, I've gotten a lot of questions lately about my 2x72 from different directions. Obviously they see ours in our videos, they see yours, they see mine, other people, and people seem to get this mental block that they have to have a 2x72 in order to do what we do. And the reality is I use my 2x72 very little for axe work. There's very little that I do with it. I'm just more comfortable doing everything by hand. And people they'll see a snippet of that 2x72 and they think, oh, that's the secret. I got to have that 2x72. It's not at all. You can accomplish anything by hand that you can do with a 2x72. 2x72 is faster if you know what you're doing. And that's part of my problem is I don't have the experience with that tool to be comfortable doing all the processes. So if you have a 2x72, it's worth learning. If you don't have a 2x72, don't think that you got to go buy one just to do this.
Or any power tool to help assist with. I mean, let's be honest. If you had to correct your bit because somebody over sharpened the toe, which is awful. Honestly, is about the most problem I come into. 2x72 helps you straighten out the geometry of the edge. It does help you eat off the meat a lot faster than a file would, but with a little bit of time and patience, you can get there all the same.
Yeah.
But the 2x72 does help that a lot, of course. But there are workarounds too. I used to use a 4x36 in an upright position. Yeah. With a piece of leather behind the platen. It's just because eliminate the chatter. You can get a lot done that way, and that's a heck of a lot cheaper route if you want to work a little faster. But I mean, we'll get into some of that maybe as we go.
So that's pretty much your power versus hand. Don't get hung up on if you don't have the power tools. You know, you can acquire the hand tools cheap. So start there, get going with that, learn that, and then work your way up. Basically for sharpening, the only tools you really need hand tool wise is a file and a puck. There's not much more to it. Now, file wise, you have some choices. Most new files are just crap. I mean, they're not going to last long. They don't cut very well out of the box. But there are some that work. I know, like the Nicholson Axe file that you can buy on Amazon. It's like $8. It's not a bad file for the money. You're probably going to sharpen maybe 5 axes and it's done. You're going to have to go buy another one or send it out to get sharpened. Which brings me to my next subject. You buy old vintage files and send them out to be sharpened, which is what I do. There's a company called Boggs Tool. They're out of California. They're a really great company. If you go on their website,
you spell that out, yeah, for anybody
it's Boggs Tools. So if you just Google that, it'll pop right up. Give the guy a call. Tell him what you have. He's going to instruct you how to ship it, and it kind of gives him a heads up to expect a shipment. I recommend sending 10 at a time. I mean, it's stupid cheap, like under $2 for like an 8-inch file, maybe $250, $275 for a 10 to 12-inch file. And the files will come back better than new. It's insane. And they last a long time. I use resharpened files for axe classes, and I just had to send them out last year. I think it was last year, and that was after 60 students used them.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Shows you the quality of steel change.
Yeah, and if you get some good old files and have them professionally sharpened, you're going to be very happy with the tools you have now. And it's a cheap investment. I mean, you can go buy files. I find them for 50 cents a file.
Oftentimes you can grab the can they're in and lot them right out to the dealer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, pick and choose your whole thing and lay it down $10 or something like that and walk away. Is there anything in particular look for files that you would pass on or not pass on?
So I always try to look for good USA files. It'll say USA on it. So obviously Nicholson is going to be your number one. Then there'll be Simmons, and what's the other one that I see a lot of? Nicholson and Simmons are the two most popular. I mean, I know there's other files out there, but these are the ones I'm familiar with, and there's such a selection of them. Those are the ones I grab. When you're looking at the file, because not all files can be sharpened.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
They'll sharpen them, but they'll paint the tang red to indicate that don't send it back. It's at the end of its life, and that file will be sharp when you get it back. But once it dulls, it's done. You know, they don't want it back to sharpen again because there's just nothing else to get out of it. But where's that going with that? So when you're looking at the files, you're wondering, is this worth saving? Well, if it's 50 cents and there's no big chunks out of it, send it off and let them worry about it. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Don't like, oh, I can't spend this 50 cents because it might not be worth it. Look for big chunks. If there's teeth missing out of the file, if there's so much rust on it you can't make out if it's a coarse or fine file, pass. But if you can make out that it's a made in USA file and it looks reasonably clean, there's no big chunks out of the teeth or anything like that, just go ahead and grab it. I've got so many files because I just bought everything, and it's amazing to me when I send them out how many come back sharp and in good serviceable condition. I don't know how many I sent out the last time. It seems to me it was like 25, and maybe 5 came back that were deemed at the end of their life. So it's pretty safe, but those are a couple choices for files. And I know there's some new brands that are made in like Sweden and Germany and stuff like that. I'm not familiar with any of those, unfortunately, so I can't really recommend them.
I could be wrong. I don't think I've seen anything inherently bad about the GB Grainfors Brooks axe file that they sell.
Yeah,
So
I don't recall either.
It's definitely going to probably cost you a bit more than you would going the. I mean, it costs you less to buy old files and send them out. So, I mean, I don't know if it's the most cost effective route if you want to do a lot of filing, but if you throw it in your pack, yeah, why not? I guess.
And then there's always eBay. I mean, you can always find new old stock files on eBay, and you'll pay a premium for them, though.
Yeah,
it is an option, but basically you need a file, and file wise I usually use like a mill bastard, which is like a fine, medium fine. I don't know all of the terminology, but I know when I look at it which ones I usually grab is like a mill bastard. Pucks. So there's quite a bit of controversy over the pucks and the brands and the quality and this and that. I don't know. I don't understand it.
Me neither.
I have the Baranox puck, which is the latest and greatest. That's supposedly superior to everyone else. It's a good puck. I'm not going to say it's not a good puck, and it does leave a little bit of a finer edge, but it's a finer grit. So obviously it's going to leave a finer edge.
Yeah, it's just doing what it would do. Yeah,
it's doing its job. So to make it sound like it's better than a Lansky, I just don't understand the mentality. The difference in price is the Lansky puck is $7 and the Baranox puck is $20. I don't see $13 difference in performance. As a matter of fact, the Lansky puck, in my opinion, cuts quicker than the Baranox, but it only makes sense because it's lower grits.
It's a lower grit. Yeah. I've used them as well, and you can rest assured if you had a chip or something like that, and you're like, this is going to take me forever, you'd be pleasantly surprised how quick you can blend out the edge and remove damage with one of those things.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that all sharpening implements need tuned. If you're going to pull something out of the box and think that you're going to get the optimal performance out of it, you're sadly mistaken. I did a YouTube video on how to tune a Lansky puck. It's actually the most popular YouTube video I've ever uploaded. It just hit 10,000 views this morning, which is insane. I've never had, most of my videos hit like 300 to 400 views. But I encourage you to go watch that video. It'll explain a Lansky puck and how to tune it to get the optimal performance out of it. And that goes the same for any other puck. The Baranox puck straight out of the box is not going to cut as well as if you were to tune it. There's other pucks out there like a Norton Oilstone, which is a I don't know what they call it. It's a two-sided stone. It's like an India stone. It works pretty good. I don't have one right now. Thor's like, I want to be in the video.
Yeah, you go ahead and talk. I'm gonna take care of him here quick.
So that's the pucks. I mean, there's some other brands I'm not completely familiar with. I know I've seen a Marbles. I can't say that. Marbles puck. I'm assuming they're all within the same compound or the same performance level or whatever. I know a lot of guys talk about they can't get a mirror polish with a puck, and I don't understand. I don't understand why everybody's trying to achieve a mirror polish other than it looks good.
Internet quality polish.
Yeah.
Everything looks better on camera when it's mirror.
Yeah, I mean, if you have, I guess it depends on what you're doing with your axe. If you're carving with the axe, a mirror polish might actually benefit you. But if you're just chopping wood and cutting down trees and doing general work, I don't see how a mirror polish is any benefit at all. I can shave hair with my axe when I sharpen it with a puck. Does it need to be sharper than that?
Poor Thor. Yeah, I know. He's not going to let up.
So there's a couple things. If you want to stick with the stone route, I have found round water stones that are 1,000 grit, and they'll help you get to a mirror. So you got to start with, like a landscape puck, and then work your way up to the 1,000 grit stone. And then finish off with a strop. I strop everything. That's one of the biggest things in sharpening is using a strop. Now, if you're dead set on having to use or having to have a mirror polish and you don't have a 2x72, then you're going to have to switch over to sandpaper. The sandpaper method. Lots of videos on the internet on that method. I just look it up. My problem with sandpaper is a consumable. I mean, a puck's a consumable as well, but a puck's going to last years and years and years and years. If you bought 2 pucks, you're probably good for the rest of your life. The sandpaper is going to last 1 sharpening per grit. So it's just a consumable that keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. I mean, you're just going to have to keep replenishing it. But if you want a mirror polish and you don't have a 2x72, that's pretty much your option. You have to use sandpaper.
Or a 1x30 or a 1x42, 2x46. There's a million belt sanding options out there now. You might have a little problem with a 4x36 kind of smooth out a mirror finish because you got no slack, but
yeah,
I imagine you could make something work with it. But I've used the oscillating sander now up to 220 grits.
Yep.
And basically working it and moving it like a puck. And I get a nice edge off of that.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really easy to over grind the edge. So, I mean, this one might come with some experience before you just go at it with something like that, but it can be done that way too. It's actually a pretty cheap alternative in power tools, considering you can get one for about $20 to $25 now, like a Black & Decker or something like that.
Yeah.
Or like a lot of us do, if you cruise the garage sales in the spring, guys get rid of these type of tools all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So we kind of touched on the tool maintenance, and a little bit, I'll touch a little bit more. Any tool that you own is going to need some maintenance and care. And I was talking earlier about tuning your puck. But the same thing goes for like your files. You need to keep them clean, keep them rust free, keep them from bouncing around on other hard objects, because it'll dull the file. Quick touch on files. A file cuts in one direction, so if you drag it backwards, you're not doing anything other than dulling the file. So always in a forward motion. We joked around about ruining the temper on axes at the beginning, but there seems to be some misinformed folks on heat treating processes. I'm no expert on heat treating, but I know enough to get myself in trouble. The thing is people say if you heat up the edge of the axe, you ruin the temper, and it is now a paperweight. And the reality is you have to heat that bit up to about 400 degrees to cause any damage. Now, obviously, if you turn the tip of your axe blue, then yes, you've reached that temper threshold and you've ruined your axe. But if you take a little bit of care and you're actually holding the steel with your bare hands, and you can still hold on to it, chances are you're not doing any damage.
Yeah, if you hit 400 degrees, you can't hold the axe.
Right.
Maybe people don't understand that. You are now burning your hands.
I'm going to say anything over about 120 degrees, you're going to feel uncomfortable. So
yeah, you won't want to hold it. Yeah, absolutely.
You're a long way away from ruining the temper. So we've seen it as bad as people saying using a puck on the edge is going to ruin the temper.
Which really perplexes us because, well, then I guess you can never sharpen your axe.
It's just sad. It is really sad that somebody is that naive, and then they go on the internet and publicly announce it. It's just crazy. Like, do some research.
These things are leaving a factory with a ground edge. I don't know how that's beyond people's understanding. So your GB has met either stones or a belt before it left.
And if you ever watch some of those videos, they're using like a crazy high-speed grinder.
They're going really fast. And like, if you look at the old videos of the old axe manufacturing, those giant wheels spinning at like, who knows how fast, at least definitely over 1,000 RPM, blowing sparks everywhere and moving the bit really quickly.
Yeah.
But here we are using these axes still without a problem,
And it's just crazy to me. I don't understand it. Just take some caution. If you can hang on, if you're holding on to that steel and it's not uncomfortable, you're probably okay. You're not really hurting the temper. But that's what I was talking about earlier. To try to avoid a bench grinder. A bench grinder just moves too fast and it cuts too fast, and it will ruin the temper quicker than you can.
This might be a little bit of thermodynamic knowledge too. The most of the those bench grinder stones are small in diameter, and they're also narrow, and they do a bad job of cooling down. Where your 2x72 a 2-inch wide belt with an open back cools itself a lot faster. That's why you don't get the heat up issues. Yeah. Oscillating sander moves the paper around a lot, and it's a 5-inch pad. It's things like that to think of. That's why you don't get the heat up as fast. But bench grinder is what, a 1/2 inch to an inch.
Yeah, it's tiny.
Wheel that's 6 inch in diameter, maybe 8 if you get a really big one. But it's moving at what, like 3,000 RPMs. A lot of them. Yeah. That's where I guess you could make it happen if you had to. But I wouldn't recommend it.
So I guess the other thing is, like, how sharp does it need to be? And I kind of touched on this a little bit, but like, really, if you think about it, how sharp does your axe need to be? Its whole design is supposed to be a resilient, how do I want to put this? A resilient tool that can take impact. So just the mere fact of the heat treat process is a little less on the hardness scale, so that it can withstand impact. It's designed to do these things. So
generally axes are lower on the Rockwell hardness than knives are. Yeah, usually not low 50s, more the mid 50 range, I believe.
Like a 55 to 50.
Yeah.
I think a 58 would probably be
a little too hard, I think.
A little too hard,
yeah.
I think, because you're starting to get into the knife range. But
yeah,
I don't know that for a fact. I don't know where they're at, but I would assume they're right in that area. So keeping in mind that you're going to use some force to power through your cut, does it really need to be mirror polish sharp, or is hair popping sharp good enough? I think some people just geek out on it too much.
And you know what? That's perfectly fine if that's what you want to do. But as far as relaying it as a must-have, I think that's where the difference should be. By all means, if you're an artist at sharpening, by all means, go ahead. But to relay that information as gospel is, I think, incorrect to do.
Yeah. A sharp axe is a safe axe, like they say. But, there's a point where too sharp. I don't know if it's possible to be too sharp, but just don't get so wrapped up into it. Make the thing sharp and then go use it.
Yeah, if you're running your thumb down, not running your thumb down, if you're doing you're checking your thumb against the edge and it's grippy to your skin, I'm pretty sure you can work with that axe and be all right. Even if it's not popping every hair off your arm like a shaving razor, I think you'd be all right. but you got to be approaching that range. You got to be up there. I mean, your entire process is cutting wood fibers. You have to get in there. You can't do that with a blunt edge like some of the oddball things that I've seen other people say. Yeah.
And then too, if you're splitting, I mean, I guess it depends on the wood you're splitting too. Like some wood split better with a blunt edge than they do with a sharp edge.
I say just like with my maul and mauls I've had in the past, I don't need it hair shaven. I just want the edge met. That's all I care about. As long as the edge meets, that's it.
I pretty much put the same edge on every axe. I do mirror polishes on some axes just because of the look. I get in the mood. I want to make it polished, so I do it. But for general purpose, I put the same edge on every axe. I make it hair popping sharp, and I finish it off with a strop. You know, there's some puck marks in it, and it'll shave some hair, but it cuts wood really well. So, you know, to me, that's good enough. It doesn't need to be any sharper than that, you know. And most of the time I just touch it up with a strop after I use it, you know, and I'll do that for a long time before I ever go back to a stone.
Yeah, I was going to lead into that unless you were already too, about maintaining that edge. Not all the work going into it, but how do we keep them, you know, how do we keep them fresh all the time? And I know you use a strop, I use a strop, but I also use steels.
Yeah.
That might be unusual. I don't see a whole lot of guys say that. I have a Sheffield Butcher steel, and I also have the Charade, the original Charade hone steel.
Little Charade, yeah.
And that's I don't know what that's made out of. Unobtainium must be, because it's compared to the new ones out there. It's like night versus day. Yeah. But that thing will take what I can, you know, a unshaving hair edge right back to it instantly. That's I mean that butcher steel, not excuse me, that steel was meant for, I believe it was meant for hunters, right? And even butchering game and stuff like that for the bone splitter and other stuff. But it also seems awful friendly for axe users as well.
Yeah. My whole game with the maintaining edge is I try to obviously not get any chips in my edges.
Yep.
Sometimes it can be avoided, but you know, you do what you can. If there's no chips in the edges, I go right to a strop. If I can get it back to hair shaving sharp with the strop, I'm good. If I can't quite get that edge back, I'll go back to my puck.
And while not needed, I believe you use green chromium oxide as well, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I also use green chromium oxide or green buffing compound. It works great for steel. Yeah. And you don't have to do it. You don't have to overload your strop. If you cover that thing green one time, you're probably good for a long time.
It doesn't take much.
No,
it does help. It does help put a nicer edge on.
Sure does.
Now, if you do have a 2x72, they make leather and felt belts for your 2x72, and if you put that green compound on one of those, look out.
Yeah. Butter smooth. Even the I've even used the cork belts in the past as well.
Yeah.
And they'll do also a very nice job. But you can get those belts for the 1x30 too.
Yeah, I actually when I had a 1x42 I had a leather belt, and now my 2x72 I have a felt. So, but it works really good. It's really quick. And it does a beautiful job. But you don't have to. You can use a hand strop. I've made all my strops. I just take a piece of wood and glue a piece of leather on it, veg tan leather. I have a very large one that I made, and I'm actually thinking about making a even bigger one. They call it a stropping plate.
How big is that?
Like 12 by 12.
Oh, that's real big. Wow.
Just think of like a big tile. I just recently started seeing these things more in the woodworking world, and I'm not sure the logic behind it. I actually want to research it a little bit more, but I think it'd be cool because you could just set this big, massive stropping plate on your bench and strop, you know, your full axe and whatever. I just think it would be cool.
Seem nice for your slicks or anything that's got a big wide bit on it that you don't have to adjust your stropping. You could just lay it across that big 12 by 12 piece and be done with it, you know?
And you would just, it's just a nice big piece of stropping area. So I might build one of those in the future, but for now I built a nice, I don't know what it is, 4x8 or something stropping plate. And then I've got some smaller ones that I call my field strops or whatever, but I just try to maintain that edge with the strop as much as possible. I want to avoid going back to the file because I don't want to remove more steel. You want to try to avoid removing steel. You don't have to.
Yeah. Especially with this old stuff, like get it all set up and maintain it. Not keep going back to a 2x72 or something like that. Most of all my I've got 2 selected out of my Connecticut collection that I'll be happy to use in wood. The rest are obviously going to stay as wall pieces or stuff like that. But I shouldn't have to go back to a 2x72 with these things. I'm not felling trees all day long, which would, obviously run through the life of an axe. These are for camp wood, and outings and things like that, But what you got next, bud?
So we'll talk about edge geometry a little bit.
Yeah.
There's I don't know as much about edge geometry as I probably should. I know this: most edges are within the 22 to 25 degree bevel.
I mean, it's safe to say too, I think we've seen information between all the books and all this different stuff that really runs that whole range, doesn't it? Like, I imagine somebody who carves with one all day has really got an opinion about it, or maybe a faller from way back when. But I think generally in that range is pretty good for all of them.
Yeah, I think anything under a 22 degree bevel is you're starting to get in your fine work, your carving axes and stuff like that. I think you'd want to avoid heavy chopping axes, felling axes, because you got to remember you're putting all the weight of that axe behind that edge. So if you start getting super thin there at the end, that's a whole lot of stress on a little bit of metal. So
not to mention it's going to make your bit a lot more sticky in wood too.
Yes,
it's not going to pop out.
Yep, it's not going to pop out. It's going to stick whenever you hit it, and then you're exerting energy to remove this bit. But I don't check every edge, but the ones I have checked is right in the 22 to 25, even 28 degree bevel, right around there. I've noticed most vintage axes, haven't been sharpened. They have the factory bevel on them, unless the edge was chipped or something like that. But for the most part, you'll find an axe and it's got, it'll have the factory bevels on it, and maybe a couple little chips there or there. It's very rare that I find an axe that's actually been sharpened. And the reason I know this is usually if you find an axe that's been sharpened by somebody that knew what they're doing, it'll have that fan shape to the bevel where they remove some of the cheek with a file to make the edge geometry thinner. Mm-hmm. The ones that don't have that, generally, if you look at them really closely, they've never been sharpened. It's just the factory edge on there. So I try to maintain factory edges on just about everything until, if it's something I use, then I'll go play with the edge a little bit. And it obviously you can't put metal back, so it's best to start at a higher degree and work your way down. So sometimes it takes me a little bit, depending on what I want to do with the axe, to get that edge where I want it anyway. I might sharpen it and then take it out and use it and see what it does and adjust from there.
I think it's another one of those, after you do 10 axes, you're probably going to know by sight where you want to be and what works good. I remember making an edge, a bevel jig when I lived at the apartment, and just out of a piece of wood, I had that because I printed it off online. I printed one and laid it down and then cut it and measured it. But now I don't think I've ever checked a bevel. I can just when I hit the grinder, I can look and I can see symmetry, looking down, but that takes a lot of experience, thousands of knives and stuff like that help with that kind of eyesight.
Yeah.
But I don't even look at the bevel anymore like that.
I know that the tool you're talking about you can make, and then there's ones you can buy now.
Yeah, you can buy the circle one made out of brass, right? I think
I have a couple of those, and those are usually what I use. But the problem is so your edge on your axe on most axes is convex. So when you're using that bevel gauge, it's more of a flat plane. So you got to be careful because you can misinterpret it. But
yep,
it works good enough. But, that's the other thing I want to talk about is convex versus Scandi. Very few axes I see have an actual Scandi grind on them. Most are convex, and the reason being for a convex edge is, for one, it adds a lot of strength to the backside of that edge, and two, it's less likely to stick in the wood because it's more of a round profile than it is flat. Not to say a Scandi grind doesn't work on an axe. There's plenty of axes with Scandi grinds. It's just not.
If I was carving small things or spoons or something like that, I can maybe see some benefit, the wood planing benefit from a Scandi edge. Yeah. But serious falling or serious wood cutting, I don't think I mean, I love the Scandi edge. I love it on my knives and things like that. When it comes to the axe, I couldn't make an argument that's a personal opinion. Go with what works for you, but it's just not something I'd want. A lot of the Fiskars that came with the Scandi, I've seen a lot of people rounding off the bevel corners of that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Essentially trying to make it a better chopper. But
and the Scandi grind on an axe also works better for splitting.
It probably would. Yeah.
You got less likely it's gonna stick in the wood. There's been not really controversy, but there's a bit of talk on double bit axes and their intended purpose. Why do they make a double bit axe? And there's a split. There's guys that say, well, the axe has two different grinds. One for fine work like felling, and the other one for grub work, which is it's a valid argument, and I believe there's some truth to that. But the one that you're less likely here is, it's just two sharp edges so that the guy didn't have to stop and sharpen his axe in the middle of falling a tree. Because back whenever they were using these things to fall trees, that's what they did all day long. And they got paid per tree, basically. So however many trees you could fell is how much money you made for the day.
It's like a chicken and egg argument. Like, I'd say the double bit obviously probably had that purpose first. I said what yesterday or a day before, if a guy's 10 feet up on a springboard, it's probably nice to have two edges to chop with, especially when he's on a 40-inch handle swinging that thing for 8 hours. He just flips it around and works, and then he sharpens the two for the next day. But if a guy's running a 20-some-inch cruiser down in the log pile, now it might make more sense to have something that scores nicely, but if he's got to blow a knot off of something, he has a back edge that's probably got a little bit more blunter edge to it. Yeah. So it's probably I think I'm that guy in the middle. I think it's probably it's a little bit of both. But yeah.
I just recently brought it up because I read something in the manual, and it's something that I've always felt, because I got to be honest with you, I've got a lot of double bits, and I've never found one that was ground at different angles. There's never been one that's been a 22 on one edge and a 25 on the other than the Council Tool saddle axe that I bought. That's what they sold it as. It came from the factory line. But so I just see all this talk about, oh yeah, there's supposed to be two different edges, and that becomes gospel because somebody in real popular made a video on it. I just don't feel that that's necessarily 100% true. Did they take advantage of that and exploit that and make it that way? Sure did. I mean, like you were just saying, if a guy's down with a cruiser, it makes more sense to have two different edges. Maybe he wants to save the nicer edge for fine work. But when the reality of it is, it was just two bits. It's like carrying two axes.
Yep.
And it's a double bit axe is well balanced.
Yes,
so
it is. It's very well
get
balanced.
nicer cut. Don't get the twist at the end of the cut. That's pretty much it for edge geometry, really. I mean,
we could get into the is everybody who's new or old. There's so many different shapes to the overall bit of axes. Some have had the scoops taken out, or phantom bevels behind the good steel. And there was a lot of attempts in the golden age of axe manufacturing to find a not just the bevel geometry, but also the entire bit geometry of what would get into wood but pop out well for you to get less stick. Right. So you see those fancy ones that have a whole lot of the steel ground out, and you get that Y look to the bit. And you see how the Swedes have settled their axes. It's just a convex edge, and then it concaves a little bit before you get back to where the eye is, and then it comes back out. And that's essentially their solve. A lot of our American axes, it seems like they settled on a slight taper from the toe to the heel. So the fatter portion of the bit is in the middle. So there's a little less steel from the toe and the heel to stick in the wood to help it pop out a little bit easier. But it seems like there's a lot. If that's the way the axe manufacturing went to, it seems like that's, I think ultimately the market and the user helped determine that in the end, and that's where it settled. Council Tool still does theirs in that manner, I believe.
I believe it.
Yeah. And but like that I mean, I don't think there's really a whole lot to spend time with there. There's a lot of designs that went around and that eventually just didn't get made anymore. And what you see on your basic true temper wood slash or something like that is where they ended up.
My suggestion has always been to everyone, it is when you're getting into this sharpening, is to just sharpen the edge that's on there, sharpen the bevel that's on there, follow that bevel, then use the axe and see where you're at instead of jumping out of the gate and putting a 22 degrees or 18 degrees bevel on there, because you can't put the steel back. So you got to take a little bit of caution. But I've found that most bevels that are on the axes already usually work pretty well, with the exception of taking a little bit of meat out of the cheeks. And usually that edge is fine for whatever purposes I'm using it for.
I don't know if you mentioned it. I don't know if it's worth digging too deeply into, but some people who chase that banana grind, I think that's another one of those somewhere somebody said it had to be done. And to some degree, I suppose, no matter how you sharpen it, because the center of the bit is going to be a little thicker than the toe and the heel, you're going to get that. But it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to, I don't know. It doesn't have to look like a speed axe. It doesn't have to look like a racing axe.
Yeah.
And, not all of them do that either. So, just throwing it out there,
Well, the whole reason for that is, like I just was kind of touching on, is to remove that thickness behind the bit.
Yep.
To thin out the bit a little bit, because after the axe penetrates, where those cheeks are wide is where it's going to wedge. So if you thin that out, it's going to cut deeper and maybe more efficiently, depending on what you're cutting and how you're doing it. So there is a purpose behind it, and I think a lot of people have taken it to an aesthetic look.
Yeah.
But, and a lot of guys I see, and myself included, will do it with paint. We'll make the banana shape.
Yeah, I've done it. Yep, I do it. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Yeah.
But there's an actual purpose there. But I don't get too worried about it. I try to make my edges even and symmetrical, and I'll take a little bit out of the cheek on every axe I sharpen, because you can just tell it's a little thick.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to maintain whatever whatever angle is on the axe to begin with. I try not to get too carried away. And then the most important thing about sharpening on any tool is if you don't get the burr, you're never going to get the tool sharp. And it's funny, I spent a lot of time learning how to hand sharpen knives, and that was always my goal, is to be able to take a stone and sharpen my knife with a stone. I always wanted to be able to do that. And I sharpened and sharpened and sharpened. I could just never get my knives really sharp. And then I started sharpening axes, and what brings it together for me is an axe is easier to sharpen. You can remove a lot more metal faster. And once I felt my first burr on an edge, it was like a freaking light bulb went off in my head. Like, oh, that's the burr. And then once I sharpened my first axe and it was hair popping sharp, and I understood why, because I got the burr, then I went back to knives, and now I can sharpen my knives just as sharp. It just takes longer because the steel's harder. You have to have patience. But I don't really know how to explain the burr other than when you sharpen the edge, you're bringing 2 points together until they meet a zero. What would be a good word to put there?
Till they meet.
Well, yeah. So you're bringing two edges together till they meet, and at the finest point, that's what makes them sharp, because they're just, I don't know, they're thinnest as possible, I guess. So when you sharpen anything, the way you know that those two edges have met is a burr will form on that edge, and it's basically a microscopic, or in some cases you can see it, sliver of steel that has rolled over the other side.
And you can flop it back and forth as you keep going, so you know you've made it.
So what you're actually doing is you're moving that burr left to right, left to right, left to right, until it eventually breaks off, and what's left is your sharp edge. So the way you feel for this is after you think you've met the two edges together, you'll run your finger across the edge, not with the edge, across the edge, the opposite from where you just finished sharpening. And if you feel steel dig into your finger, and I mean light pressure, and this isn't any pressure at all. If you feel steel dragging on your finger, you have created the burr. And you can do this all across the edge and feel where your burr is and where your burr is. If you never get to that point, you're never going to get sharp backs. It's not going to happen. You just be frustrated.
All right. What else you have on your list? Anything?
That pretty much sums it up. Obviously, there's more to sharpening, but it's more of a hands-on, just doing it and getting the practice, with anything.
Well, if you wanted, I thought we might. So this is our 5th broadcast here. Maybe we'll dig into. I think you mentioned this. Dig into what we're working on.
Yeah.
And what we did this week for those, because come to find out, we have people listening to this that are not in the groups.
Yeah.
It's getting outside of where you would directly see what we're working on. And if you want, Chris did some sweet build here. If he wants to talk about that real quick.
So my latest build was my Holtzbrook's Arvika 5-star racing axe. So that's obviously a new axe that you can buy. Which I did. I bought one on the internet. I can't remember the name of the website, but either way, it's sort of an expensive axe. But the thing with the HB is it resembles a Connecticut. It's literally the closest thing you can buy to a Connecticut pattern axe. So it's got a gorgeous profile on it, and it's about 4 pounds. I wish it was less. I wish it was like a 3-pound axe, but we'll take what we can get.
Yeah. You can make it one with a lot of belts.
Yeah, manufacturers aren't producing Connecticut's anymore, regardless of how loud the public speaks. They seem to have no interest at all doing it. But luckily, RV or Holzbrooks does. Anyways, I wasn't completely satisfied with the overall product when I got it. So, and I'll be nice and I'll leave it at that. So I cut the handle out and I put one of my 30-inch reproduction handles in it. I blued the head and then I dyed the handle green, which turned out really nice. But overall, it was a pretty cool project, and it's a user axe. I'm doing all this to use it, because it's a new axe, so I'm not real worried about losing it or breaking it or anything like that.
And you got that. That's the Arvika Holtbrooks at the near $200 price point, right?
Yeah, so it's $169, I believe.
Now, weren't we looking, and we found, was it another version of that axe for a considerably less amount of money, had the same head? Remember we found that somebody had posted it in the group, and the price point was lower, but it was the same head.
I think I know what you're talking about. We were wondering if it was the same head, but it didn't have the Holtz Brooks etch in it, right? Or stamps.
There was something different about it, but it was a Swedish head. And that got me thinking. I mean, doesn't Holtz Brooks make axes for several companies? I mean, it would certainly make sense if somebody wanted to commission that at a price, and they were able to sell it a little less. So I believe there's another option for that Avika style head.
Yeah.
At a lower price point. I should have wrote it down for the podcast, but I believe it was around $100, wasn't it? Like 115 maybe.
Maybe. Yeah. I barely remember it, but I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was one post in the group, and I went and looked into it. But there is options out there. Yeah.
I definitely feel that this HP is priced a little high. Maybe if it came with a little better fit and finish, I wouldn't feel that way. Like, I don't care about the edge. It doesn't come really sharp, and they have a generic edge on it, like any axe. I mean, and that doesn't bother me at all. It's up to the end user to put the edge on it that they want to use. But it was, the handle was the biggest thing, and the handle was super thick, like just like baseball bat thick. And of course, you could thin that out and make it fit your hands, which would be no problem at all. But it would have never had a fawn's foot ever. They do, for some reason, Sweden, they do that flat fawn's foot that just has a little hook to catch your finger.
Yeah,
there's no sex appeal at all, and it really, to me, I don't think it functions as well as an actual traditional fawn's foot. So no matter what I did to this handle, it would have never been right, never been the way I wanted it. And then the hang was less than desirable. So,
yeah, I just recently did a job for a guy on that. What was that one? That was the Husqvarna. And I who makes their axes? Is that Holtbrooks as well?
I believe.
I could be wrong, so we'll say we may be wrong, so somebody doesn't have to correct us. But right. That one, it clearly appeared as an instance of this axe is rushed through a production. The head wasn't set down on the neck far enough, and there was an incredible amount of gaps. So and the handle was super thick. So I ended up thinning out the handle, and I even cleaned up the wedge and all that for him. And he went out and used it. And because I had oiled the head, it started slopping around on him. So he gave me the axe back. He dug out the wedge for me, which was really nice of him. But I shaped and reset that head down towards the shoulder, filled all the gaps at the bottom of the eye, and then put a real wedge job in there. And now he's swinging that axe like it's brand new, and solved that problem. That's one of those cases. Well, there you go. I mean, it's a production axe. You're going to come into these type of problems, so it is what it is.
And I hate to pick on our Holzbrooks at all.
This is what happens. It's not there's my GBs that I have ever owned. I'm just saying in Sweden in general, they were all awesome. So, yeah. And most people's experience is awesome. That these are just happen to be things that we come across. That's all.
I just wish, for the price point, I could have just put an edge on it and used it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I got small hands.
You know what? I'll get into that. We'll call it the gripe session. So like I did since the last podcast. What have I done? Like 3 axes probably. The 2 that are fresh in my head was the Collins Legitimus, Connecticut, and then I did a very old Champion Kelly Works. That's an old head. I mean, I'd have to get with Miller on it, but I'm gonna guess 1900-ish, give or take years off of that. But and that's an old head. But I did both in French curves. Obviously, I'm doing my entire Connecticut collection in French curves. One was a lathe copy of one I did that I got through Chris here. And then the one sitting next to me here is one that I did from scratch with some wood that was given to me by Ryan Lombrock, which is really cool at the Axe Meet. So, and I'm in love with this one. And these are the first 2 real burnt handles that I did to raise some of the soft grain and stuff. And I got my idea from 2 places. Obviously, Chris had done one recently, and also Kevin Kraft has got one that he showed me. I don't think he's ever shared before. He did a really nice burn handle job on one of his too.
Nice.
And those are the 2 builds I did. The Kelly Works Champion I did in a flat black, and this one here is in my favorite forest green. But the paint's only gonna last so long because this one's gonna see wood. This is one of my several Legitimuses, but yeah, that's what I've worked on. And the gripe was branching off of what you just said about handle thickness. And we kind of covered that in the, against the grain. So if you haven't heard that episode, you can go back again. But the constant comment you get a lot is these handles are too thin. And I got one on that other build I did. I did the green handle with the, we'll call it white head.
Yeah.
And I got that from one of the Collins editions that Mike Miller has that's fresh. Remember that white one he put on his wall? It didn't occur to me to use paint an axe head white, but you see they did it right from the factory. That thing looked gorgeous. But I had more than one person on more than one platform comment on how thin the handle is. And I've got a Collins on the wall behind me. I got a Collins, which is that? I think that's a Legitimus Michigan with original handle. And I look at that handle that came right from the factory. And then I got this Dorpian double bit that Mike Miller gave me, which has got the original handle. It looks like he might have reset the wedge, but the handle's original. That thing is way thinner than the French curves that I do with thin handles. Yep. That thing is a toothpick with the steel at the other end. I mean, as far in thinness wise, that handle is almost, it's 2/3 of how thin my French curves are. And I think it's one of those.
I was just reading somewhere the thickness of the handle was like 7/8 or 3/4. Where was I reading it at?
Probably one of your books.
I was just reading that. I wish I had have.
And people, well, that wouldn't fit my hands. I'm reasonably sure that the men that were swinging these heads over 100 years ago were a lot harder than you are. Yeah. And there's a reason that sure, they could break. That absolutely could happen. But I think the manner in which they swung an axe all day long is far different than the way we do it now. And I think we have guys here just getting the head in motion and letting the weight of the head do the work through experience and skill, then where we tend to probably power through a lot of things. And if you're doing the former, you don't need a big thick handle that's got a whole ton of, you know what I mean? That's over an inch thick, like we see on these. I know why modern manufacturers do it, because it's good security. You send out an axe handle with a nice big thick handle, you're less likely for the inexperienced end user to blow it right apart. You know what I mean? It makes sense. That's why we all thin them out. I'd rather grip a thinner handle with a nice fat pommel than I would an extra thick handle all day long. If I have to over grip to hold on to the thing all day, then instead of getting a stronger grip, I don't know, logically, it just makes more sense. And so when I see all these guys comment, it makes you wonder. It's like, how much are you really swinging it? It makes me wonder, so for instance, that the one I just thinned out for Dave, his hands are much different than my size, but he's had to overgrip that thing. That thing was huge. I mean, the handle was thicker than the width of the head.
Yeah.
So if you start doing the math on that, why would you want your handle to be thicker than the head? You would not, because every time you push, especially if you were splitting or something, you're just chewing that handle away. So I look at the vintage handles. They are not as thick and wide as the head geometry is. They are not.
The sheer fact that some of those vintage handles still exist.
That's exactly the point. Yeah, that good point.
It's proof it's more about skill than it is the handle itself.
Yeah. Yeah, this Dorpian one here, I shouldn't have mounted it to that old board. I might take it off and do some comparative pictures or something for a post and show you how thin that thing is, that it survived all this time. That head's been used. You know what I mean? And somebody's used that handle enough that it's got that used smooth handle look to it that you get from all those old handles. But
I've had plenty of old handles through my hands. You know, it's a shame that I couldn't save them.
Yep, so have I. Yep.
But they were all thin. Nothing
Thin.
like today.
Yep. Exactly.
It's overkill. And it's uncomfortable, so I mean you gotta make it fit you if you can.
And that was the end of my little gripe at the end. But that's what I worked on, and that's what Chris worked on. And what do you got? What's your next one coming up? Got anything?
Yeah, I'm gonna finish. So I got to finish the sheath for that Arvika. But before I do that, I'm gonna work on this American Beauty that I just picked up. I'm gonna hang it.
That is a sweet head.
Yeah, I want to get it done. I'm gonna put the Anorana candle on it just because it's a unique head. I figure it needs a unique candle.
Absolutely.
But I don't plan on. I'm not gonna sharpen that axe. I'm just gonna hang it and leave it as it is. I don't think it's ever been well. It's got a little bit of signs of some grinding on it, but nothing crazy. I think I'll just leave it. I mean, basically, it looks from the factory, you know. So I'm gonna
see. Not all of my Connecticut's. They all look sharp. Most of them are not finished.
Yeah.
In some cases, the edge isn't completely met. There's no intention for me to. I'm not using these.
Right.
These won't see wood. I didn't see the need to, finish the edge to a hair pop. It just didn't make sense. But they certainly have the appearance of it. Yeah. And then they'll stay like that forever, until somebody throws them in the trash a few generations from now.
Right. But I didn't want to. I don't want to do much work to the head because honestly, when I got it, it was just covered with boiled linseed oil. Like somebody put a layer of boiled linseed oil on it. And it kind of looked a little crappy with the linseed oil on it, but then I brought it home and cleaned it up with a wire wheel. And it cleaned up really nice. And I was like, I think I'm just going to leave this head as is. I painted it, obviously. I painted the rose in the background just to bring it out. The background actually was black, factory. Where it says American Beauty, that was black. So I just kind of set that back. I was able to find a few pictures of them on the internet and then a little bit of history. That was an old hardware store. So other than that, though, I have no idea who made it.
Yeah. I'm sure Miller could dig that up for you.
Yeah. I'm assuming it was a hardware store in PA, so it was probably
Man Lewiston. Yeah, it'd be the first one I'd go to, most likely. Yeah.
But that's my next one. I gotta get cracking on Dave Canterbury's axe.
I got one more. That's what is that one up there? It's another Kelly I have to do. That's green painted, and I'll actually be done with all the Connecticut's that I have. I'd like to do a video from handle cut from scratch to mount on that one for YouTube. But without my desire to really make YouTube videos anymore, who knows if I'll really do it. But I'll give it an attempt anyway.
I've noticed an influx of activity on YouTube, so maybe they changed the algorithms again, and so us small guys have a chance again. See.
Yeah. And other than that, for those of you guys that came out to the axe meet, I consider that it did twice as well plus some than I expected it to do. I think Chris at one time counted 20-something people that was in the building at one time in my shop. I think through the day, we had almost 30 people float through. I know it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but we're just axe people. Like that's it. Chris came out from Ohio. We had a guy come up from Kentucky, Pennsylvania. We had a guy drive down from New Hampshire. Um, and it was a real success. It was very busy. We didn't get a chance to work on a whole lot until late afternoon. And then we had one guy do a handle from scratch and a mount. Ryan Lombrock did kind of like a handle demonstration, carved one with a straw knife. There's some wheeling and dealing in the afternoon, and the giveaways went over well. Who I'd like to thank, Noah Trieger with Axe Wax. Check him out. He donated some stuff. Thrain Axe & Co. donated a bunch of stuff. Red Label Abrasives donated some stuff, plus some belts for the guys to use. Who else do we have in there? Bark Eater Ben sent up some coffee. I think that was our 4 big ones. I don't remember if anybody else. If I forgot you, I'm sorry. I should have wrote them down. But that was really cool and a success. And I believe I'll probably do another one next year. And maybe for some additional news, Chris has got some news as well.
Yeah, so I've teamed up with Colonial Homestead here in Ohio. If you're not familiar with Colonial Homestead, it's an Amish-owned antique tool store, and it's incredible. Like, he has everything from blacksmithing to woodworking to axes to leather tools, even some old I guess muzzle loaders, but what do they call older
muskets?
Yeah, muskets. I sound stupid right now talking about.
Yeah, it's because you're thinking of it on the fly. That's why.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah.
But it's an incredible store in itself, and Dan Raber is the owner. He's 100% Amish. He lives the Amish life. He's not plugged into any of the internet stuff or any of this, any of the world that we're plugged into. And it's just neat to go down there and just talk to him because he has such a unique story and such a unique place. And they actually reached out to me to be an instructor at their school. They have a school across the street from this store, and they want me to teach axe class on a regular basis. So our first class is scheduled for June 15th. And if you go to colonialhomestead.org and click on the class schedule, you can register there. I believe the class is $100, and I think they have room for 10. I think it's what we agreed upon. And it's a beautiful classroom. It's an old building. They've got all maple workbenches in there with actual vices and chalkboard. It's an actual classroom, versus just coming, like when I have class at my house, it's just in my shop, and it's just it's not set up for a large amount of people. I can usually accommodate 3 to 4 people there. Leaf definitely has a much better situation with the schoolhouse, and we can accommodate more people there. But it's just cool to be able to bring axe class to an actual classroom environment, and then being combined with Colonial Homestead. I mean, it's just, if you've never been to Colonial Homestead and you live in Ohio, you need to plan a day trip and bring cash. They don't take credit card. The prices are all over the place. I mean, I always say he's on the high end of retail, but he's really not. I mean, I just bought this American Beauty axe from him, and I feel like I got a really good deal.
You got a half the cost you probably would have had to pay on eBay, or more. Yeah.
So I mean, there's some things that you can tell that he's into, like anybody else, and then the prices will reflect that. And then there's other things that he's just trying to pass it along. So you got to go in there with an open mind and lots of cash, because you're going to want to buy everything.
Yeah, and with that, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just an amazing place. But if you're interested in axe class and you need help, you can contact me directly or go to that colonialhomestead.org. And I've got it posted in the Axe Hounds group as an event. And plenty of information out there on it.
With that too, I know some people have asked, and this is going to tie up Chris with his full-time job doing the axe classes. It's really killing his schedule. We don't have any plans anytime in the foreseeable future of doing an axe class up here in the Northeast at my place. And I really don't want to do it without him. but I think I can find a happy medium that makes it more interesting for me, and maybe do axe workshop. That's not exactly the same thing. This would provide a person bringing their own head and handle that they've sourced themselves. The work's done themselves, and not so much a classroom environment, but more of a shop share, which is something I've considered maybe opening up to as well, because I enjoy the maker community. But maybe, a low flat rate price locks you down for the day. Obviously, this isn't a full on class. I wouldn't charge somebody a whole lot of money, but enough to cover the coffee and the belts and some other extra tools I might have laying around. And I've seen some of the other workshops. I did a little bit of research around it. A lot of them require you to bring your own tools anyway. Yeah. So I don't think that's out of the realm of asking. It's not out of the realm of reason to ask people to bring their own tools. But obviously, I would provide a few things. I would also, show people how to use a grinder properly, or things like that they wouldn't normally have access to. But it's something to consider. If I do that, maybe I do one in the fall or something. But as far as the axe meets go, mine was way more of a success than I thought it would be. I made $0 on this event. I charged nobody anything. Other than the coffee I was about to spend, which somebody who couldn't make it that day due to other obligations sent up some. It was a cost neutral event for me, but I got to meet a lot of people. A lot of people got to get some things they normally wouldn't get their hands on. And, it just strengthened our community, which I think is important. So I would encourage anybody, to hold some events like this. We get a lot of guys in California that say they want to do things like this or have axe classes, but then the interest doesn't fizzle out. You just got to do it. I don't, make the date like I did. All I had to do was turn my lights on and clean my shop up. That's all I had to do. Everybody else came, and I didn't have to set nothing up. So I definitely think it's worth the effort. I believe there's an axe event coming up this weekend.
Yeah, so this
extravaganza.
Yeah, in PA. I wish I could make that. I just can't. It's just so. I work nights, so I get off work at midnight or 11:30 on Friday night, and then I have an hour and 15-minute commute home. So when it's all said and done, it's 1 a.m. when I'm walking in my door Saturday morning. So for me to hop in the car and go anywhere on the weekend is tough because the reality is I'd make it there Saturday night, and then everybody's packing up Sunday morning. So I can't make them all. It's hard. I have to take a day off from work. But it sounds like that's going to be a good turnout. A lot of people are going to be there. I really wish I could go.
Now, is that butted up against another event too?
I believe so. I believe there's something.
I thought it was. I think there's. So I guess what I'm saying is you could go there for that, but also it's family conducive. I believe there's other things going on too. Right. I should have got some information before I brought it up. But there's a lot going on there at that event.
There's
around it as well.
There's a link to the event in our group. If you just go to the events page.
Yep. Axeman Bill there has the event up, but I think you just search it. It should even come up on Google, Extravaganza. So
probably. Yeah.
But yeah, we'll throw a free plug out for that. Now, if the people didn't know, we're watching this, but these things exist, and I encourage you, if you have a little bit of space, to host one yourself. I think you'll be surprised how far people will travel to do that for a day.
I'm loosely planning one for summer sometime here. I don't know. I have to look at our schedule and really try to fit this in because I got a lot going on this summer. But I wouldn't mind doing another one here in the summer. So that'll be Ohio for anybody that doesn't know where I'm at. And the last one I held here was a really good turnout. That's why I'd like to do one in the summer because we could move it out to the backyard and not so cramped in the shop and freezing. But
yeah, I lucked out. We had a gorgeous day for ours. We got really lucky with that one. And plus, too, you find it because I shared that across my social medias. You had people who are not axe collectors that are just outdoorsmen, wood crafters, things like that. And then you guys that are they're interested in axes. So you get a little bit of everybody that show up to that thing.
I think the highlight for me at yours was meeting Ryan. Just meeting him in person because I've done business with Ryan Lambert.
Yep, so have I.
That's how you say it.
Yep.
I've done business with him, but I've never actually spoke to him or talked to him in person. So it was nice to come there and actually meet him in person, shake his hand, and put the
Face
put
to
a
a name.
face, face to name, and meet the man behind the maker. Really.
Yeah, I remember when he got out of his car, I said, "Hi, what's your name?" And he looked at me puzzled. I'm like, he says, "Oh, I'm Ryan." I'm like, "Ryan, I don't know what you look like."
Yeah.
I said, "I didn't know what you look like, man. Nice to meet you." So I felt like an idiot, but I'd never seen his face before. So,
Yeah. I don't want to. I'm not singling out. Obviously, I was happy to meet everybody that showed up that day. It's just
absolutely, yeah.
It's just
Seeing
a high.
Miller, it was cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Miller's been an avatar for almost 10 years, I think, for me. Mike Miller. Yeah, I've only ever seen an avatar of his face. So, and talking on and off through the years on Bushcraft USA to, just
you've always known of him as Operator 1975.
Yeah.
It's never been Miller.
Yeah. But hey, that was a lengthy podcast, but what do you think? We good?
Yeah. Yep. I think it was a good one.
Yeah, we got a lot more. It's Chris and I's schedule, and it's one of those things getting the kids out of the house for me. And my wife happened to be off a day to do it and scheduling these podcasts. So, we'll try not to let them get this far in between because this one was a while, I believe.
Yeah.
But other than that, thanks for everybody listening. Please, when you see us post about this, like and share it. Share it to your media platforms. Mention it on Instagram. Take a screenshot of the podcast, something like that, and help us get the word out even further. And with that, we appreciate it, and catch you next time.
See you guys.